Can I remind the House that Clause 2 is the commencement clause, and debate should be confined to issues around the commencement date. Gareth Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Kia ora, ngā mihi nui, kia koutou kia ora. It's great to be here debating this bill. I missed the beginning of the Committee of the Whole House stage with a new baby all the way back in December, so it's great to... I'm glad that we managed to keep some of this bill alive to be able to debate tonight, because I had a great privilege of sitting on the Education Select Committee hearing those hundreds of submissions to do with this bill, and what I saw was a great insight to what's going to happen on the 1st of January 2012 when this bill commences. Tonight, I think there's a whole host of arguments which need an airing, which need to be on the floor of this chamber, and I'm looking forward to discussing some of the amendments I'm going to be seeking to have passed tonight, because whilst the Greens will not be supporting the bill as it currently stands, we think our amendments have a lot of merit and should be passed. So this bill is coming into effect, if it passes its third reading, on the 1st of January 2012. Now, what's that date? It is right after the 2011 election. What we're seeing is an agenda from this side of the House to force this bill and the negative impacts it's going to have on our student associations, our students, our universities and polytechs till after the election. What we're going to see is people cast their ballot not knowing the impact of this bill, because to be frank, this bill, whilst it's interesting, while it's fascinating, has been the domain of the student associations, the New Zealand University Students Association, politicians, lobbyists. It hasn't reached the public. And I think if the public knew what was going to happen when this bill commences on the 1st of January 2012, they might have a second thought when they're in the ballot booth. This is a bad bill, plainly and simply. It's an extreme bill. It's simply an ideological solution in search of a problem. On the Select Committee, I did not hear from anyone what the problem was, and it's basically the ACT Party has somehow convinced the National Party, who do not have to support it, and even at this late stage in the proceedings, do not have to support it passing. Today we had the honour of having the Australian Prime Minister in our chamber, and maybe we should have actually asked Prime Minister Gillard what we could learn from the Australian experience, because when this bill commences on the 1st of January 2012, we should take the lessons learnt from Australia, because we're not doing this in a vacuum. We've had an experiment across the ditch into what happens when you force a voluntary student membership model onto student associations. We should have asked Prime Minister Gillard why her government is now changing their legislation, and if we will likely change our legislation after this bill commences. We should have asked Prime Minister Gillard why they had to pour $120 million extra.
Commencement.
Thank you, Mr Chair. The commencement. We have to ask, why did they have to pour $120 million into their tertiary sector after their bill commenced? And we should be asking the legitimate question, because I haven't heard from the government benches or the minister what they're going to do for a transition program, or how much money extra they're going to have to put into it, because our associations are suffering because this bill commences. Mr Chair, I've got a whole host of extra things to say, some great supplementary order papers which I look forward to speaking, because when this bill commences it's going to be bad news for New Zealand.
Let's see what Chris Hipkins can do.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. Mr Chairman, I'm looking forward to this debate on the commencement and when this bill should come into effect. And I have three main points that I want to raise in favour of deferring the date upon which this bill comes into effect. The first of which is around the fiscal risk to the government posed by this bill, because this bill doesn't just have an impact on students. The impact that it will have on students flows on to the institutions, which flows on to the government. And I want to explain that. And that's one of the reasons why I think this needs to be delayed, because I think dealing with the flow-on impact of the decisions being taken in this bill will take longer than the sort of 9 to 10 months that this bill is effectively allowing.